All right, folks, welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered. A black man spent 33 years in prison based on a lie told by a Chicago police lieutenant who later became the top cop in Chicago. Robert Smith was convicted and sentenced to life for a 1987 double homicide. He was primarily convicted on the testimony of Philip Cline, who said Smith confessed to the murders. A judge has overturned Smith's conviction. It was overturned in 2020. He's now suing the city for wrongful conviction. Dan Hinkel, investigative reporter with Better Government Association, is here to tell us how all of this happened. Dan, glad to have you here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. So what happened in this case? Double murder. How did they pin it on Robert Smith?
Well, Mr. Smith arrived at the scene shortly after it was discovered because the home was on fire where these two women had lived, Edith Yeager and Willie Bell Alexander. He became upset. There'd been a number of allegations, and there's sort of differing stories about what happened. But he ended up back at the police station at Area 2 in Chicago, where...
So when you say he arrived on the scene, was he living there, or was he just somebody saw a fire and just showed up and said, hey, what's going on?
It was his wife's mother's home. And so they arrived, yeah.
And so was he related to any of the women?
It's his mother-in-law, yeah.
Got it. So his mother-in-law was one of the two women who was in the home?
Correct.
Okay, so they took him to Area 2.
Yeah, the women had their throats slit, and he was there for several hours. The house fire had happened in the morning, and the police said that late that night that he confessed, and he had pretty shortly after after they arrested him, and after he allegedly made the confession, he started saying that he had been beaten. That he had been abused by the officers, basically, and they had his lawyers tried to get the confession thrown out on the basis that it was that he was reporting that he had been abused. And nonetheless, he was tried and convicted and sentenced to life in prison. He spent 33 years in there in prison before he prevailed upon the authorities to throw his case out. Okay,
so they said he confessed to the crime. Was there any physical evidence that tied him to the crime?
The physical evidence is complicated and disputed. When they threw out his conviction, let me back up. In Illinois, there's a torture commission that was convened specifically to hear allegations like this. And in 2013, they said they reviewed his case, and they said that the evidence beyond the confession was pretty insubstantial, and that it didn't mean much without the confession.
Oh, the evidence didn't mean much without the confession?
There was very little. Their ruling was that there was not a lot to go on without the confession. Yeah.
Okay, so they don't have a lot of evidence. All you pretty much have is a confession. When did Robert say, this was beaten out of me, or I didn't confess?
Early on, he said that he was beaten. Within, I think, months, he had complained to both doctors who had seen him and the police disciplinary authorities in Chicago. He wrote letters and said that he'd been beaten.
All right, so for the people who are not familiar with Chicago, not familiar with Area 2, you mentioned the Torture Commission. Chicago has a long and sordid history of cops torturing black men, forcing confessions, and most folks are familiar with one particular infamous sergeant.
I believe you're speaking of Commander John Burge.
Yeah, Commander John Burge. Yeah.
John Burge was he eventually rose to the rank of commander. He, throughout the 70s and 80s, there have been, of course, a lot of the facts are disputed as they would be in cases like these, but there have been numerous investigations and, reports, and he's generally understood to have been the ringleader of a group of officers who served under him who abused and tortured suspects in in criminal cases.
So Cline. So Smith says Cline. Is he saying Cline beat the confession out of him, or is he saying that Cline lied about him actually confessing?
No, he didn't make any. He's not made any allegation of physical abuse. He has not made any allegation of physical abuse against Phil Cline, but he has. Am I still there, by the way?
Yeah, you're here. You're here.
Okay, good. Sorry, I had incoming call. My bad. He's never said that Phil Cline abused him. He says that that he was abused by other detectives who had worked under Commander Burge. And his allegations against Phil Cline generally are that he lied in his testimony against him.
So this is, again, it just goes to show you the fundamental problems that Chicago police, and when people always talk about, you just had the mayor, talk about some $20 million for a wellness fund because the cops and their low morale. And this man spent 33 years in prison.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. It's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing to have happen to you. It's been a problem in Chicago for a very long time. I mean, the Chicago Police Department has a pretty well-established issue with wrongful convictions. And it's not just the police department. It's it's prosecutors' offices, it's judges. It's a holistic issue with the system.
It's absolutely nonsensical and makes no sense whatsoever. So Robert plans to sue the city.
He is suing the city, yeah.
He's suing the city, and so obviously this can make a huge difference in that case.
Well, yeah, this was his new filing was introduced as part of that lawsuit, and basically what's new about this is that he's alleging that Cline invented his allegations against Robert about the confession both at his suppression hearing about his confession and at the trial, and even in some later testimony.
Again, for folks out there, this is what we call another day for Chicago police. Dan, we certainly appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I want to pull my panel now. Kelly Bethea, communication strategist. Michael Imhotep, host, African History Network show. Matt Manning, civil rights attorney. Matt, again, we don't have Matt yet. This happens. I mean, this is the thing over and over and over again. Over and over and over again, we hear coming out of Chicago. Michael, you're not far. You're there in Detroit. When we hear these examples, and then people go, but that's sort of one cop. No. Okay, when it keeps happening, it's called a systemic problem.
Right, systemic problems, especially in the Chicago Police Department, and this is not. I think the last count, I think there's like 16,000 officers in the Chicago Police Department, something like this. So I'm not saying all of them are guilty, but when you go study John Burge and you go study the Black Ops detention site that they had in Chicago, that where in Spencer Ackerman for the Guardian. I think he was the one that broke this story a few years ago. And it talked about how this was a detention center where certain suspects, overwhelmingly African-American men, were taken. They were beaten. Confessions were tortured out of them. When their attorneys were trying to find where they are in the system, they couldn't find them, things like this. And you at the same time you had a few years ago, you had about $500 million in police misconduct lawsuits that had to be paid out by the Chicago Police Department. It was about 105 police misconduct lawsuits before they had to pay to settle for the Laquan McDonald police misconduct lawsuit as well. So, and what's interesting in this case, I'm glad you had Dan Hinkel on from Better Government Reporting, Better Government Administration, or BGA, bettergov.org. In the article here, it talks about how the filing that Robert Smith's attorneys filed also includes attendance logs showing that Lieutenant Cline was off the day that Robert Smith allegedly confessed, and multiple police reports were devoid of Lieutenant Cline's name as well. So, hopefully Lieutenant Cline, if this is all accurate, is charged with perjury as well, and hopefully he goes to prison if the evidence proves that he lied under oath also.
This thing, Matt Manning, again, I keep telling people, I mean, first of all, if you're the city and you have to set up a torture commission, Matt, we're talking about systemic problems. Chicago has had to pay out upwards of $40 million in reparations to individuals, black, who were beaten with phone books, who were forced confessions by these Chicago cops, who kept getting their pensions.
I mean, 2 of those settlements came within the last 4 years. And I don't know if you mentioned this before, but what I found particularly troubling in this case is that the prosecutors actually moved to have Mr. Smith's conviction vacated. That's incredibly important because they would be the ones in the best position to determine whether, in fact, Mr. Smith was guilty. So the fact that the city is doubling down and adding this to the cadre of settlements it's paid over the years is absurd, particularly in light of the persuasive evidence that not only was Lieutenant Cline not there and not involved, but that there are systemic issues and that he may have perjured himself on 4 separate occasions. I mean, that's the crux of their lawsuit, is that they should have a default judgment, because if you lie and that lie is the underpinning for a lawsuit, then the Seventh Circuit has case law that says a judge can just default you out. And that's precisely what should happen here, considering the long history of police abuse.
Kelly, again, I love to hear these people who talk about back to blue. Okay. How about back to black?
I mean, that would be too much like right, because it's the black men who are victims in this case, black people in general who are victims of this monstrosity, this tragedy that is a broken criminal justice system, specifically in Chicago. I mean, we don't have to get into just the litany of cases and millions of dollars that have been spent trying to, repair the damage that these victims have incurred. I mean, that's what reparations are. It really means repair. It's to repair the person. But for anyone to deny these allegations on behalf of the Chicago Police Department, I mean, the proof is in the pudding at this point. Granted, you do have to go to court, you have to prove things, yes, but at the same time, the same article that Michael was just referring to from bettergov.org, it said that the city had paid more than $27 million in fees to outside lawyers in Burge-related cases. That's one officer. Things that happened under one officer cost the city $27 million. And then taxpayers paid more than $80 million regarding settlements, reparations, and other costs tied to this one officer. So you're talking about well over $100 million regarding cases pertaining to something that happened under one officer. So I can only imagine how much the city would have to pay if every single officer who did something, atrocious, which according to the history of Chicago is quite a few, just how broke would Chicago be should all of their dirty laundry be aired out?
This thing it just keeps happening, and I love the people who all of a sudden they complain about Black Lives Matter protesters, but it's amazing how quiet they get when it comes to the multi-million-dollar settlements and a person like Robert Smith spending 33 years in prison. Yeah, this is what Philip Cline looks like. Show it again. This is the guy, and he became the top cop. No, you have it, guys, right there in video playback. Come on. Thank you. That's the top. He was the top cop. He was the superintendent of the Chicago Police Department. That right there is what you call shameful behavior by cops in this country. And again, we go through this repeatedly when we're talking about these officers, when we're talking about the conduct of police officers, and they just continue all across the country. They continue in Los Angeles. They continue in Chicago. They continue in St. Louis. We did the story yesterday of a cop in Kansas City, and it just goes on and on and on. And at some point, we're going to see changes happen in this country. Which also begs the question, where you at, Senator Tim Scott? What's the problem with the George Floyd Justice Act? All that talk, all that back and forth that he was running his mouth about, oh, how we're going to do right by the families. Nothing. And he is the one standing in the way, trying to blame Democrats. No, you can't blame Democrats for that one because you are standing in the way. And Republicans, again, love to tout police and support the cops and critical of defund the police. How about you stop funding lawsuits? How about you stop funding settlements? But no, they don't want to do that. They want to continue to play these games and then get mad at us for highlighting it, get mad at us for raising the attention, get mad at us when we then begin to show people exactly what is going on. And again, we're supposed to sit here and say, oh, well, you know what? It's just a few bad apples. No, it's not. This is endemic. This is systemic. And it's happening far too many places in America.
Back to that Roland Martin unfiltered video in just one moment.
Time to be smart.
Roland Martin's doing this every day.
Oh, no punches!
Thank you, Roland Martin, for always giving voice to the issues.
Look for Roland Martin in the whirlwind, to quote Marcus Garvey again.
The video looks phenomenal, so I'm really excited to see it on my big screen.
Support this man, Black media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
I got to defer to the brilliance of Dr. Carr and to the brilliance of the Black Star Network.
I am rolling with Roland all the way. Honored to be on a show that you own. A black man owns the show.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Roland was amazing on that.
Stay black. I love y'all.
I can't commend you enough about this platform that you've created for us to be able to share who we are, what we're doing in the world, and the impact that we're having.
Let's be smart. Bring your eyeballs home.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
You dig?